has been all about setting and managing expectations. So hopefully people have a better view on what the expectations are, and hopefully picked up some choice nugs about managing careers and whatnot. Today, we brought in Lt Col Trumble as our guest speaker. What was it? Asper wrote, Rumble in the jungle, Trumble. Must be Rumble in the jumble, Trumble. Anywho, he is a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, a Ready for Warrior of 2004, of which I am the same. Probably the best class ever. So what we like to do on these OPDs is have our guest speaker just give a quick background on themselves, let them know where you've been, what you've done, kind of let people see the different perspectives that have led us to where we are. So I'll kick it over to you.
All right. Hey, morning double D's. Thanks for checking in with us on our the Cosmo Kramer experience, as I like to call it. Hats off to that crew. So the whole chief pilot office is just doing a great job during this whole COVID pandemic, trying to stay engaged, right? Is just I'm just hats off to you guys for doing all the work behind the scenes to get this going and keeping the reminders that are going out to folks so we can all stay engaged with each other. Next, I have to ask Jeff Asper where he found Rumble in the Jungle Trumble, because was that from someone that tipped you off what my boxing intro used to be back in the day, or what?
That was from you, sir. Told me okay. We were probably fairly coherent at cruise, just hanging out, awake. But yeah, you told me that one.
Yeah, maybe I'll share some of the old boxing videos at some point. But yeah, that was my intro to being called into the ring. Anyhow. Yep. So Air Force Academy 2004 with Cosmo Kramer. Good times back then. Since then was a FAPE. So shout out to your FAPEs that are online here from 2004 to 2009. Then went to Fred, my big calling, as it were, that Dover Air Force Base. So with the Pelicans, Kaka. I don't think we have any Pelicans on right now. I think Joe Loftus is actually launching today on LME. Then from there, I got called back to ATC as a pit instructor, T1s, and had a good time there. And then went to, let's see here, to IDE with the Army for a year at Fort Leavenworth. So I got to see those folks actually just out my back patio was the federal penitentiary. So my kids were able to listen to the roll call every morning and every night. It was a good experience for them as well. And then went off to Italy, and I hope to get someone out to the European theater and perhaps that assignment during my tour here as commander here in a few weeks. Spent 2 years out there with NATO. I was in the strategy division with the Deployable Air Command and Control Center. That's a mouthful. We can talk about that more at length later. But essentially, it's like an AWACS on the ground that deploys with a bunch of 18-wheelers and radars and radios, et cetera, and can essentially move around the European theater within about 48 hours notice. So it was a good time there. I have some fun stories that we'll share later. Then I came back, and I was your DO for 2 years. Handed off now to Chris Fernandez, who's doing an awesome job. And then I'm kind of in a bit of a break, some R&R, working a few things behind the scenes and blocking tactics right now as I'm crafting a en route maintenance trainer con-op that I've been tasked to do by 18th Air Force. Good times. I'll be knocking that out today after I talk with you all. So without further ado, let's hop on into the OPD for today. So taking care of others and yourself. This is the essence of what we do in the Air Force as officers, right? And it is kind of the essence of what we do as pilots in the C5. Just peeling back the onion on what it means to be, an aircraft commander in the C5. In my humble opinion, having been in multiple MAGCOMs, having now been international with NATO in Italy and working with 29 international partners there from different, various nations. I have to say that as an aircraft commander in a C5, you are crafting your leadership skills from the very onset as a co-pilot, and then especially as an aircraft commander. It's, in my opinion, a crucible of leadership. We talk about the Air Force Academy as being a crucible of leadership. I think if you're going to pick one aircraft, it's going to be the C5. Yeah, many folks will say there's other aircraft that have larger crew complements. That's true. The AWACS, the RC-135, but you're essentially a bus driver. I've had friends that have flown those aircraft, and you truly are a bit of a bus driver in that aircraft, where in the C5, you are at the center of the action, everything from alert to step into the jet to the whole aircraft flying through the system, and then the debrief at the end. You're at the center. So from there, let's go straight into, hopefully everybody watched the posting that Cosmo put up. I thought it was great. All the previous ones are great, and our ability to put those on the cloud or on YouTube are going to be an awesome opportunity just to kind of retouch on these in the future. And all those folks that show up in the next few years, being able to peel back and read them are going to be an awesome opportunity. So expectations. And as we go through these chunks, I want to try and give you guys some books that I've read, some suggestions, or some articles that you can kind of read at your leisure as you have some free time during this COVID thing, which may last through the summer. So you can kind of peel back the onion and read a little bit more about these topics. So expectations. Colonel Pollock and I are of the very like mind when it comes to what we want our officer corps to embody, what we want you guys to pursue. And that's a balance of professional development, right? Developing yourself as an officer, and again, also what you like to do. And that kind of goes back to taking care of yourself, the big three pillars that you have to have pretty secure if you're going to be a leader of others. So let's start off with one. And these books I'm going to list aren't the new hot thing. It's in the top 10 that's on Amazon or on, HBR. These are some books that have gone back, that have been around for like potentially 80 years. One example would be, and I know Cosmo Kramer is a big fan of this, is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. That was published first in 1936. Behavioral scientists, and just kind of going into how to, essentially, it's in the title, right? How to win friends, influence people. What makes people tick, right? And how do you build teams and lead effectively with the various types of personalities that exist, both in our Air Force and in our world with the folks around you. First, collaboration. So this is something that a lot of us, most of us know is an important key skill to have as a leader, is collaboration, especially as a CGO, right? Which is looking around. I'm scrolling through all the faces that are checked in today. I think we're 80%. Oh, there's Joel. I thought you were launching, dude, or you already landed.
Or slipped 24 hours.
Oh, standard copy. All right, so we got a couple of FGOs here, but I would say 80-90% we have right here are CGOs, young to middle-aged CGOs. So one thing that I wish I had maybe thought about a little bit more or practiced a little bit more is collaboration. I'm not going to get into the promotion paradigm that we have in the Air Force, or how stratifications or work, etc. But if you have a critically minded leader, or if you have someone that can read through, someone who's just looking out for themselves, Colonel Pollock and I highly value collaboration. And like I said before, this is something that I didn't quite realize as a young CGO. It's more what I saw was, hey, I'm going to work as hard as I can. I'm going to fly as many hours. I'm going to come up with as many new ideas, new innovative ideas that I can. And I'm going to market myself a little bit, right? And that's what it takes to continue and lead. And one thing I quickly realized was that you can't do it all. You cannot do it all. Fred, the Air Force, what we do as an Air Force is far too big to do by yourself. And an empathetic leader, a critically minded thinker, is going to see that and see through any one person who's trying to kind of bolster themselves. So collaboration, goodness, if I can underline that 3 different times, is so huge. So what does that mean, collaboration? Building small teams, and that could be within your shop, or it could be when you go fly a mission, once a month, every 2 months, you're building a small team quickly, right? There's some trust issues that have to be worked through in the very beginning. And we have a lot of instantaneous trust that's built because, for one, we're all in the military, right? And we trust each other with our lives when you're flying in infrared. But also we have a level of instantaneous trust because we're all muleys, right? And we have certain traits that we all hold pretty dear to what it is to be a muley and be part of the 22nd. So here's the first book, and it's Innovation Code. If you guys want to jot this down. So Innovation Code by Jeff DeGraff. This is a quick read. And I love quick reads because a lot of times we only have an hour or two or just a few minutes a day to peel something open and just take a few snippets. This book, Innovation Code by Jeff DeGraff, is super chunky, right? And it's very kind of subject driven, where you can pull a few pieces out in a minute or two and reference it, highlight. There's some areas to take some notes. And essentially all it comes down to is when you're set as a flight commander, an assistant flight commander, or just as an officer in a shop, you've got a group of anywhere between 10 and up to 80 people, right? If you're in transition flight, but a lot of the elements there in transition flight are about, 8 to 10 folks. And each person is going to have their own skills. They're going to have their own strengths and weaknesses, and they're going to have their own tendencies, right? You're going to have introverts. You're going to have extroverts. You have folks that are more engineer-minded. You're going to have folks that are a little more kind of soft-minded with they're strong in the behavioral science kind of realm. So Innovation Code kind of blocks out those people into 5 different types, from the engineer to the sage, talking like your Jim Thomases, your Gonzos, which are kind of slow to change, but they've been around the block a few times. It's not their first rodeo. So how do you use them, not just in innovating, but getting through the daily grind or what your do-outs are for that shop and kind of playing to their strengths. So I'll stop right there, but that's a great one on collaboration and building teams. The next one is Critical Thinkers. So thinking fast and slow. So thinking fast and slow, the Daniel Conoman is the author of that one. So thinking fast and slow is another good one, where it really kind of talks about how to separate kind of that emotional thought, or like I know Colonel Pollock has used this term, playing blitz chess. So making quick decisions, finding the 80% solution, make a quick decision, and then finding perhaps those, or realizing when you have a difficult problem set arise, right? That's maybe not always apparent, and slowing down and peeling back that onion and finding out what the root cause of the issue is and thinking slowly. So Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Conoman, another behavioral scientist. That is a good book. It's a bit longer, but it is built fairly chunky, where you can kind of pull different sections out and read to. But then that's another critical aspect of expectations is, as officers, you have to be critical thinkers, right? There's so much thrash, there's so many red herrings that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, that you have to be able to peel through so actually slow the thrash down and peel away from the outliers that are not important, right? They're just distractions, to get to the root cause and help the team focus on what's important and moving through. Otherwise, you'll find yourself, spending long hours on things that just aren't important. And that'll pay for bigger dividends as you develop that skill, as you get, longer in the tooth and you get into positions as a DO or a commander, and then beyond, because there is a lot of thrash and there is a lot of red herrings out there that could just take your time away. Okay, next one is Speaking Truth to Power. So this is a great one. Whenever I get asked to write my first Tailwinds excerpt, and if you guys remember, Colonel Pollock wrote Influential Leaders, I think was the title of his little piece, which is very good. I'm going to talk about professional courage. So there's another good book that has to deal with the Doolittle Raiders, and it was actually written by Doolittle. I Can Never Be So Lucky, and it talks about professional courage and speaking truth to power. And what we all realize, and this is a quick one, so Speaking Truth to Power by Simon Sinek, there's like a 10-minute clip on YouTube that you guys can watch. I actually recommend watching it right after we're done, because it's super fast and it's impactful. It essentially talks about the risks of speaking truth to leadership or in an organization that maybe doesn't want to hear the truth sometimes, because the truth isn't popular. And then learning how to talk that truth and not essentially have folks put up defensive walls where they're like, nope, the defenses are up. I don't know, like the words that are coming out of your mouth. because it's potentially offensive to me. And I don't mean offensive like we're talking like racist or sexual. I'm talking about people that have a job, call it maybe even myself as a DO. If someone comes forward and says, hey, boss, we're building crews all wrong. As the DO who's been sitting for potentially a year, naturally my walls are going to go up like, whoa, you're basically saying that I have not done my job, or not doing my job poorly. Where are you coming from? What's your angle? As opposed to you coming to me and saying, hey, boss, I've been thinking, and I have an idea, maybe how we can perhaps build crews more effectively and get to the root cause of why we're having folks, go out on the road and perhaps should have had a break and training ride, or perhaps should have had maybe more ground training time to cover their GK before they go out on their LTM. And now me receiving that information, I go, oh, this is really good. This sounds like someone's done some collaboration perhaps with other individuals, or have built some solidarity, again, coming forward with maybe as a group or 2 or 3, where my defensive walls don't go up. So speaking truth to power is a great way of just learning how to approach a problem set, in an environment where folks can be very defensive, right? Because we have these skill sets we've built, or we put in these positions of ownership, like operations as a DO, where we take that very personally, right? And I'm using myself as an example just because I don't want to, bring up anybody else that's potentially listening, because we've all dealt with these issues before. So Speaking Truth to Power by Simon Sinek, the book, and also the 10-minute clip if you want to watch it on YouTube, really good. And that's an awesome skill to build as an officer, because that goes along with collaboration and building teams, because you can tear a team apart very quickly if you get negative and start, incorrectly speaking truth to power. How about that? Okay, next. And at any point, actually, I want to stop and just kind of open it up if anybody wants to add anything. So before we go on to leading on the road, does anyone else have anything to add about expectations? Were they seen, over the past years under Colonel Pollock's tenure and myself as a DO, where there was something that maybe kind of piqued their interest, and you'd like to just talk a little more about, or something you'd like to maybe you think maybe a change you've seen from your previous assignment going into the double dues, where we do better or we could potentially benefit from. I'll just open it up for a couple minutes before I move on. Okay. All right. So moving forward, leading on the road, and hopefully I'm not boring everybody. I'm going to try and keep you guys engaged as possible. And I have a few stories that I can tell along the way. So leading on the road, holy smokes, I already talked about Fred as a leadership crucible, and it truly is. And in my mind, it basically comes down to, and Cosmo Kramer touched on this during his video, is balancing crew accountability and being that protective figure, being that, if you want, a lack of a better term, that mom or dad who's going to protect their team, right, when they're in the face of danger. Whether that's going to be, the danger is going to be TACC that's trying to give you guys a crappy setup that's potentially illegal, you know what I mean, or just wrong, or potentially just the sheer risk of what we do, right? Whenever there's, an emergency engine shutdown, or your pressurization issue, you're that mom or dad that's protecting the team that's going to do that emergency descent, right, to get below 250 and 180, so that we don't have to go through decompression sickness training, or not training, but decompression sickness recovery when we land, right? Or best case or worst case, I should say, you're going to protect the team and save their lives, right? So it's balancing crew accountability and being that protective figure. So I want to bring up one more book, and this one is, gosh, it's an easy read, and I heard him come speak to us at Dover Air Force Base as a young captain, is Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. So Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. And this really kind of goes more to protecting your team. And it's so the title of that book was essentially derived from Major Flynn, who was a Marine Corps general during the Iraq campaign, the Second Iraq War. And essentially comes down to this, is that as a leader, you have to put the interests and needs of the team before yours, right? And why is that, right? So why is that so important in the human endeavor of leading in people into combat? Is because they're trusting you, right, with not only protecting them, but holding the line, right? Holding the line in such that whenever they're faced with an existential threat, whether it's ground fire or the aircraft itself, that you're going to be standing in front being able to take that first barrage, right? When I say that first barrage, it could come from TACC, it could come from not getting the support on the ground. If they're getting yelled at by some ATOC personnel or PAX terminal for X, Y, or Z, or you're getting stormed by maintenance personnel as soon as you land an IUD, where the SIF clearly says that they're going to stand by for 20 minutes until we get health screening accomplished, you're the first one to hop out of your seat, run down there and say, what's going on? With a calm, collected voice, right? Not, don't meet screaming with screaming, because that thrash only builds on thrash, but being that calm, collected voice that's going to walk down and say, hey guys, how can I help? What's the situation here? Along with kind of going down to that leaders eat last of basic needs of being, hey, do we not have the food support? Or we do not have, the ability to get whatever supplies we need? Be the first one to make that phone call. Be the first one to stand up to that, whether it's the command post personnel that's saying, yeah, sorry guys, you can't go to the shop at, yeah, by the way, the commissary is closed and so is the chow hall. You just say, well, I would like to talk to your supervisor. I would like to talk to the FSS commander, whoever it is, because this is unacceptable. And the folks that are in the jet, right, the crew sees that. And you're building trust. There's that instantaneous trust I was talking about, but you're building that deep-seated trust that goes so far in not only that flight, and the rest of that mission, but goes forward back into the culture of the squadron and builds on that 360 trust that we have as muleys and double deuce, where the officers, the pilots, are going to take that first face shot, right? Whatever that first face shot is going to be, in order to protect the team and move out, move forward, and accomplish the mission. So important. So leaders eat last, Simon Sinek. Anyone else want to kind of add into that before I move on to the next thing? We're at 22 minutes right now. Okay. And Cosmo, dude, you always have great words, dude. If you wanna chime in and add on to that with a story or anything, just to kind of compliment or just further develop that line of thought, please do. Okay, all right. Taking care of self. This one is maybe even just kind of comes first out of all the ones we've talked about, because if you're not right, if you're not grounded into kind of the three pillars, I hate to use the three pillars the Air Force talks about, so mental, physical, and spiritual. But really, when you get down to it, what's your center of gravity? Where do you get your power from, if you want to use that term? Whether it's going to be, that physical fitness, or whether it's going to be that spiritual connection, or just that mental development through reading books or going through, discussions, etc., with other like-minded folks. Where you are grounded in what you believe in, right? Because you have to stand up for what you believe in, right? And if you can't satisfy that need going forward, how are you expected to lead others, right? A quick story here. So he wouldn't mind if I dropped his name. So I was a FAPE flight commander, so not an easy job. So I was a FAPE flight commander at Vance Air Force Base, and one of my lieutenant FAPEs, now Lieutenant Colonel Select Dan Moss. You guys ever flown with him? Any of the folks that went through Vance? Jeff Asper, you probably flew with him at Pitt, I'm guessing.
Yep. Yeah, he's down at Pitt now, sir.
Yeah. So now Lieutenant Colonel Select Dan Moss. He made a poor decision coming back from scooters at Vance one night, and led to potentially him getting kicked out of the Air Force, right? So he's going to be Lieutenant Colonel now, and he's doing great things, and he's an amazing Patriot pilot and airman. I love him to death. I was his flight commander, right? And I had the opportunity to go bail him out of jail and essentially work through his recovery. So from convincing the wing commander not to kick him out of the Air Force to his professional recovery from, being a bright and shiny fate to now, potentially getting kicked out, to now how do you kind of regrow yourself through this tour, right? Because he had about 2 years left at that point before he moves on to his next assignment. He went from, like I said, bright and shiny to, well below ground, to digging his way out. and he wanted to figure out how he can dig himself out as quickly as possible. He was volunteering for everything from Christmas parties to the squadron picnic to developing, new GK guides, to the point where he was running himself like ragged. And I was worried about him just doing his basic job, which was flying, right, and teaching undergraduate pilots to be safe in the air, right, and to graduate pilot training. And it was a few, heart-to-hearts that I had to sit down with him probably daily and say, brother, I need you to stop this. I need you to focus on yourself. I want you to focus on you eating right? Because this is the dude who's pounding monsters just because he's trying to stay up, because he was up till midnight trying to develop this new GK guide, or trying to secure the next holiday party locale for the squadron. And I said, brother, I want you to stop all that. Stop all the extraneous stuff that trying to be number one, because you need to be able to survive. And that's just critical also to kind of being in the Air Force, is just surviving. I hate to say that because we want to see people bloom, but you have to be able to survive to excel. Does that make any sense? So you have to have that foundation first to be able to move forward and be the number one or the number two at whatever you're trying to be, whether it's an instructor pilot or an evaluator or a CGO or a lieutenant or what have you. You have to be able to survive first, and you have to have brilliance in the basics. And there's another book I'm going to drop on you real quick, and that's going to be Lessons on Leadership. This is a new one that came out, right? Lessons on Leadership by previous Secretary Mattis, General Mattis, right? And I think everyone's fairly familiar with his past accolades, so I'm not going to go into detail. But he talks about brilliance in the basics, and you have to get that done right. And you have to do that well before you're either going to find yourself to get into a recovery situation or to excel, I don't want to say above peers, but amongst your peers, just due to the fact of being so grounded in what you do in your primary role. And that's really kind of what's come down to in taking care of self professionally, right? What your role is, and taking care of self in those three main pillars, right? And one of those I hate to talk about, or I don't know, hate to talk about, is that I hate the Air Force does not talk about, is that family piece. We always say, family always. And the boss talks about harmonizing, you know what I mean? And the Air Force talks about balance, which I don't like either, but harmonizing the work with your family, right? And those three pillars of physical, spiritual, and mental that is along with your family. Because if the family's not right, heck, you can't even do the basics in your role, right? So they build on each other. And taking care of self is just so critical, and it kind of underlines that whole foundation into all these expectations leading on the road, and then next going into output. Cosmo, the rest of the team, anybody have anything to add on taking care of self before we move forward? Okay. All right, the output. And this kind of gets into more of taking care of self professionally and making sure you're being recognized and the folks you lead are being recognized. So bullet writing. I'm not going to get into the minutia of bullet writing, okay? But I will say this is taking time early, little snippets here and there to learn how to write a bullet will pay you huge dividends later. So in the beginning, as a flight commander, it probably took me, 2 hours to write an OPR from start to finish, and I was awful at it, and I sucked, and the squadron commander would kick it back and be like, you suck, and you need to get better at this, and I would be like, yes, sir, I know, and I'd have to work on it, back and forth, because it's freaking hard. It's like code, right? It's like this like secret messaging code that if you were going to repeat to your grandma on the phone, she'd think that you had a lobotomy. Like you're like, what strange language are you speaking to me? Because it does not make any sense, right? But it's so critical and core to like what we do from award writing to getting people promoted. It sounds, it's crazy, right? And we've all lived through this. And some of the gray hairs in the room are like, yeah, I know, and I wish we could change it, but I don't see that changing at any point anytime soon. So how do you set yourself up for success? And I think it starts with, for one, if you're a lieutenant, sitting down with your flight commander and saying, hey, what stuff should I be giving you when it comes due for my OPR? And I talk about like those big 4 dates. I know I'm bouncing around here a little bit, but those big 4 dates about knowing when your OPR is due, right? So that's so important as a lieutenant. If you don't know when your OPR is due, you're wrong, right? Because you should be building up to the point where you're, 2 months out, 45 days out from that OPR, where you can give at least a napkin with things written down on, or hopefully a Word doc with just some sentences and some data that you can give to your flight commander to chew on and build an OPR. So it's knowing when your OPR is due, right? And I'm going to bounce around, but I want to hit on these big four. To know when your PT test is due, right? Because the quickest way to sink your career is to fail a PT test leading up to your OPR closeout. And now you got a referral OPR and there's no recovery from that, or there's almost no recovery from that. To knowing your check ride's due, right? So I think I'm going to have my check ride with Ali here in a couple weeks to see him on the line. So I hope you're ready for that, dude. We're going to have a good time with Colonel Linton. It's going to be awesome. To next is knowing when your flight physiological date is due, right? So going to do your flight phys is important, right? Because all of those big four can like pause your career or sink it potentially if you are not tracking those dates and building towards it. So I'll stop right there and go back towards the outputs. So bullet writing, getting some data written down so you can pass on to your flight commander is super important. Then as a flight commander and above, and I know we have Heather Denning, we have some other execs that are online, your time spent behind the computer, working through how to, see a bad bullet or how to develop a bullet, potentially have some good data, will pay huge dividends later. Now I can crank out an OPR in probably like 15 or 20 minutes because I have to, right? Because it's important that I do not dwell on that amount of time and I can dwell on other things. Same with Colonel Pollack. And again, it goes back to having great execs, putting the right people in the right places so that you do get a good product. And that goes down to the flight commanders and lieutenants, that building that good product to present to your boss also shows them that you care. Not you care about their time, but you also care about yourself. Because I'm sure you all have heard this term that no one's going to care more about your OPR, your career, than yourself. I say that's partially true. That's kind of like a baseline understanding to go forward for the rest of your career, because I would say that should be true. You should care the most. And the next person behind that is your supervisor and your squadron commander should care the most. And we do spend time on looking at those because it is so important in you moving forward to that next rank so you can take on that next role in your Air Force career. The one thing I did, and this is just a technique, right? So there's nothing written in AFI that says how to collect information from your subordinates, but I asked weekly my FAPEs that were underneath me advance, and I was a flight commander again at Dover Air Force Base. On a share drive, they would add one bullet with a date every week. It could be I stocked the flipping Snacko bar for 15 minutes on Friday. Perfect, dude. Throw that in there with a date, and I would check it on Fridays, be like, oh, everyone's doing something. Or if they're on the road, I'm like, got it. You know what I mean? You're on the road, dude. No worries. But when you got back, it takes them 2 minutes to say what they did that week. And before you know it, now you've got 48 to 52 lines of information built when you go, do for that OPR, which only needs 9 lines, right? And you're just overwhelmed with data. And now that lieutenant or that captain underneath you, or even, we're talking EPRs, that staff sergeant or airman, the data is already there, right? And all you have to do is extrapolate and put it into some bullets. So just some quick techniques there. Back to what Cosmo was saying in his YouTube video, that little bit of data over time, those small things, just like building your resume for the airlines, right? Keeping a logbook and just making small little, adjustments early and often will pay huge dividends later. Easier said than done, but that discipline is going to pay off. Okay, anything else for output before I move on to managing career? I promise I'll keep it less than 45 minutes. Okay, managing career. I know you've heard me say this before, but in one line, to be a muley, in my mind, to be an officer, to be successful, you need to be a playmaker in the jet and a closer in the office. So what does that mean? In my mind, that's kind of a 360 muley, that if I can count on you in the jet, for one, we're talking about foundations to be safe, right? To know Section 5, know all your limits, but be a playmaker. So when you have to have that engine shut down, to when you have to do a no-flap heavyweight landing, to when you have to be able to do that, the contingency procedures on 30 West because you have electrical fire and it's February, right? And you know your ETP calculations, right? So thanks, Millie Hale, for doing that this week. That you have slop on those ETP calculations that you can turn around and go back to Canada because it's clear blue in 22, as opposed to following exactly what the book says like a robot and taking all the data that TACC gives you and continuing on to Europe where it's 200 overcasts and a half-mile viz. being a playmaker in the jet, right, for one, and then being a closer in the office. And what does that mean? When you're in the office, you take accountability, right, of whatever role you have in that shop, but also accountability for those underneath you. And if you're on the road, then you hand that duty off. You hand either that short-term project, that long-term project development, or that normal weekly due out of your shop off to somebody else that's responsible, and you hold them accountable as well. Or if you're good at collaboration, you've built some other friends, right, in the squadron, some other colleagues in the squadron that you've done that for previously, and they can take that on for you. And obviously you take a shared credit, right? Something else that Colonel Pollock and I look for is a sharing of credit for different things. Kind of that humble approach to being a muley. So a playmaker in the jet and a closer in the office is really kind of what, if I in one sentence, managing your career comes down to as a pilot. And I will tell you that when you either go forward to be an airline pilot or go forward to be a football coach or a teacher at kindergarten or whatever you want to do, they're going to ask for a resume, right? And they're going to want to look at those accolades and what you've done in the past. And they want to be able to see you be able to manage things in the here and now, which is kind of the playmaker in the jet, right? Under stress, being able to be that calm, collected pilot, that officer, that leader under stress in a short-term threat situation. And then also be that person that can take a process. I'm talking about being a closer in the office, that long-term, identifying root cause type of individual that's going to be critically minded over time, slow thinker. They can be methodical and do those in spades, right? So they complement each other. What else here? And then lastly, if you choose, right, we're all about building leaders in the Air Force and developing you and being focused on your future, whatever you desire to have that future be. When you go forward to different schools, right, so your selection for IDE, your selection for being a squadron commander at the Phoenix board, they're going to look at your previous check rides. I promise you, like I had, something on my check ride where they asked the question, they're like, hey, what was the background behind this? And I was like, holy smokes, that happened when I was like a lieutenant, but cool. You know what I mean? Like they want to know if you're a playmaker in the jet, right, that you have credibility in the aircraft that you're about to go command a squadron of. And then a closer in the office. And that's also more so what's in your OPRs over than more so than what the stuff you do in the aircraft. So I will stop right there and kind of open it up for just some other adjustments, questions, any comments of what I've said so far. If anything seems like off topic or something that is kind of just, diametrically opposed of what you've heard previously or what you've come to understand how we operate here in the Double Deuce. Or you can talk about your favorite drink, favorite mix, barbecue that you developed, barbecue recipe, cars you fixed, any other type of interesting things that you all been working since this whole COVID thing kicked off.
Anybody make any of them drinks I'm giving you recipes for? I know I am.
Nobody. It's a quiet Thursday.
There's got to be one question out there from somebody. How does this work? Or, what do you recommend for this? Or an old dude who's like, hey, this has worked for me or something I do. Come on.
Or if anybody thinks I'm just spitting heresy or just the blue Kool-Aid. Because I'm not a blue Kool-Aid dude. If you guys haven't figured out that yet. And I'm pretty real. So if you guys have questions, like I'll talk to it. And we can be super real in forums like this with things y'all have seen in the past or questions about potential stuff in the future. And as always, the Cosmo office is always open if you guys need to go talk to him or me.
Alex, come on with it.
Yeah, so I was very fortunate to go on my last mission with Colonel Trumble, and I learned a hell of a lot between him and Ben Leiter. But one thing that I have struggled with in previous missions that I'm trying to be better at, and this is kind of more where my question is going to be coming from, is what's a good way to not only like update your logbook with your, your mission you just did, or rather keeping yourself accountable for updating it? Because I think, Colonel Trumble, you mentioned this when I was talking about what I want to do with all those notes I was taking, is that you have to be diligent in making sure that you carry out those things, because it's so easy to just like go home and just forget it, right? It's so easy just to like go back and be like, all right, that mission's done, I'm good, I learned some things. But if you don't revisit it, and you don't look back at your notes, and you don't look back at the mission as a whole, and that's my big weakness, is like, hey, there was this one snapshot in the mission that was like the most important thing on the mission, but there were like all these other little things that as you put them together actually do become a big thing, but you just don't look at it because there was like an IFE in the mission, right? What's like a really good way that doesn't overburden all the other stuff that is important in your life, but is making sure that you do take the time to go back and look at it? Because that's something that I struggle with, especially as like a new, weapon system flyer, if you will.
Joel Loftus, what do you got? You have a recommendation?
For keeping a logbook?
You're the sage, man. You're the sage in the room. I'm looking around. Other than Cosmo and I, you're the Fred sage.
Alex, those are a long question. See, summarize for me real quick. Give me a shortened what you're going for.
Yeah, sorry. So what's a good way to keep yourself like accountable in making sure you're reviewing things that have happened to you on the road? I mean, it's easy to say like, oh, just do it. But especially in this like whole COVID time, it's like you've got, several meetings a day. Obviously you're at home. So if you've got kids or animals or whatever, like yard work, it's hard to prioritize sometimes. And a lot of those smaller things can start to like go lower on the list. Is it something that like a lot of you guys have learned to just like right in the morning when like no one's awake and you grab your cup of coffee, you go sit down and like review that stuff? Is it a time-based thing? Is it how long you do it? I mean, I'm sure everyone's different, so it's different for every person. But the question is, what's a good way to keep yourself accountable for, I don't know, like updating all of your flying stuff?
Okay. Yeah. It's a good question. I think it's going to depend a little bit on your personality, right? Some people like the very regimented schedule. Some people, like myself, tend to be the if you wait until the last minute, it only takes a minute kind of person, which isn't always the most beneficial. Sometimes it takes more than a minute. But I always go back to, when I'm giving people recommendations for like things to study and things to review, I think something that people don't really do a lot is like, I always tell people that it's always got to come back to procedure, right? So what's procedurally required? So if I haven't studied in a while, I just read section 2. I read the checklist steps. I read the expanded checklist. Because the nice thing about our airplane is with having a flight engineer is that, we kind of have someone to read the checklist to us. We have some things to do to help manage that. So the other part of it, right, is it takes that time and that experience to kind of find your rhythm and your pattern. One of the things that for me from the training perspective right now that's like the most concerning in the COVID times is how do we balance keeping people safe with building what I would call like your aviation foundation, right? Maybe for someone like me who's flown the C5 for 7 or 8 years now, I'm not as concerned when I haven't flown for a month, because I'm rusty when I come back. I might miss a checklist step here or there, something like that. But maybe for someone who hasn't flown as frequently, they don't have that foundation to rely back on. That spidey sense maybe isn't quite as strong. So that's certainly something that I'm considering. I think obviously, making the CTs and things like that super high priority, because that's your chance right now to be engaged. Obviously, sometimes you're going to have, like I wasn't at CT yesterday because we had our intel brief scheduled at the same time, or on Tuesday, sorry. So even things like that where it's like, man, I really missed that. So the fact that we have these resources out there to go back and watch that sort of thing, I think is super helpful right now. Yeah, I mean, in terms of like setting up a rhythm or something like that, I don't have a great answer for you because I don't necessarily have a rhythm, I'll be honest. In terms of like, I studied a 202 this month, I studied a 217 this month or anything like that. But that's certainly something to, just take a hack at, a chapter a day, or, a couple chapters a week or something like that.
Is there anyone who does have like a regimented life, as they would call it, and kind of like how you guys do it? I'm just curious because I haven't, like Joel, I study, but it's so random when I do it. I'm trying to look for a better way to do it, just so I feel like I'm keeping myself more accountable. So I don't know if anyone else has a different idea of it too.
Hey, this is Howder. I can share an idea. It's not something that I implement, but it's something that I just read in a book. Not really read. I'm listening to audiobooks as I run. But the book's called "When: The Scientific Timing," or the scientific. Hold on. The Scientific Secrets of Perfect Timing. And one thing he talks about there is like the Seinfeld method. And basically, what he does is he gets a calendar, like a big calendar, and then each day he does something. He take like a big red marker and he like puts an X in there. And the whole point of it, like the title of his like strategy is like, don't break the chain. So like each day you make like a big X, and then you like post it somewhere where you can see it, so that every time you look at it, it's like, okay, I got to keep this chain going. And then once you got like 2, 3, 4 weeks going, you have this super long chain, and I guess it helps him. It gives him motivation to like not break the chain. And like what he uses it for is like he writes every day, no matter whether he's like feeling super creative or whatever. But I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but something I just read. That's what I got.
One more thing to add. So I typically find myself being less regimented because of the throes of life, that things just happen, and there's random things that occur in ops, at least in the past 2 years. So it's been very difficult to follow a very strict regimen. But there are certain things you have to do every day, right? And I think I'm alluding to some things where there's nothing else to do but to just kind of sit. So at those opportunities, sometimes there are some things you could be looking at and studying or potentially reading that you will have to do probably every single day, right? May only be for 5 or 10 minutes, but it has to occur, right? Dinner, eating, other bodily functions that you're like, well, there's nothing else to do here. I could probably engage my mind a little bit. Or like a lot of those notes, right? I'm talking back to Alex, what we were referring to. Like some of those notes, those pages, we had our IFE, 5 days ago, right? Climbing out of Kadena, then again at Dakota. It probably takes 5 minutes to review, right? And the point I was making, Alex, is whenever you revisit that memory, we talk about penguins in the iceberg. When you revisit that memory, now that penguin gets like cleats that are stuck in the ice, right? That are much less likely to fall off when other penguins start getting jumbled up in there, and you start learning about new things, in your career about Fred. But being able to revisit that memory and then tie that back to what Joel said, to procedure, right? To those numbers, and when those different altitudes, I absolutely have to get down below, or getting back to that bleed air system, because I know now Alex, and even my understanding of the M model, bleed air system is much more developed now. When we landed, we walked back there with the flashlight with Gonzo, right, with an instructor, and then Sam Callsign, an evaluator engineer, and we're crawling over ducts and looking at the turbines and looking at the low temperature control valve, and I was like, holy smokes, I didn't know it was right there. I thought it was here. You know what I mean? That understanding now has cemented on that iceberg, if you will. I'm gonna use that analogy. And now when Alex revisits that note with, now he had that emergency, event and that procedure that's tied to it, and then that understanding, that walk around, post-flight, that is a memory now. That's not just a rote memory, that's an experiential memory that's going to stay there for a long period of time. And I would expect him probably to brief that if he wanted to on his AC upgrade, his IP upgrade, or a check ride, because now he has a story to tell along with it, and that just helps grab attention of others and creates a memory for them. Speaking to my instructors and ACs a little bit right now. Great point. What else? We're not going to go past an hour. We're at 52 minutes.
We've had multiple requests for a boxing story.
Boxing story. How about this? How about I play? I have a few of my fights recorded, so I'll play a couple. Yeah, I got a couple good ones that I'll play. There's no YouTube videos, no, from Jeff Gwanch. This is before YouTube. This is 2001, 2004. I don't know. I don't think YouTube existed then. These are no joke
on YouTube.
VHS converted to a DVD, and now it's on a laptop. So I just have to extract it. I think I used an app called VHS to DVD, something like that. But yeah, I'll wait for it to have a video tied to it, because it'll be much more entertaining to the different individuals I've fought. But yeah, a lot of fighting opportunities actually on the West Coast here at Cal Berkeley and UNR and UNLV in Las Vegas. Lots of good times here on the West Coast and up in Seattle. But yeah, I'll play a video and we can tell the story under that. But some good ones. Yeah, VHS. Who was that? Was that Justin? Yeah, dude. I'll bring one in sometime. Cosmo and I can tell you all about a VHS. Be kind, rewind. What else?
Sorry, I got a quick question. This is DePledge. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I got you, brother. Go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Just a quick question. It seemed like when I was working with you in ops, you always had a good finger on the pulse of the section back there. I was just curious. I mean, we've all had leaders in our past who seem, out of touch with the people that they're leading. So I was wondering if there's something you did on a regular basis to sort of stay in tune or in touch with the people that you were leading, or if that was just something you had to do to, you kept your ear to the ground every day, to kind of get the pulse, or you talk to individuals that you trusted within ops. How would you stay in tune?
That's a good question. So, and I kind of passed this along to Fez when we were doing our turnover, and I offered him some books and some things to read. And I would say the Air Force is very good at producing process-driven, I hate to use this term, but robots, right? Where I have this to do out the end of the week. I have these many reports. I have this, there's these function I need to complete. I'm just going to focus on that. And what you find, and this is also occurring, I think there's some books about this worldwide as we're getting to this, these devices in front of us, right? And we're going heads down and we're having less of a human element, and developing those soft skills, I like to call them, with people, is literally just pushing the deadlines back. I will tell you, I've been late on whether it's going to be OPRs to reports I do to the group, to reports there's one right now that I'm late on that I have to write today. This is some OST op board that I have to write for the 18th Air Force commander that he wants, for whatever reason, the double deuce to write about how we can help en route maintenance and also get our loadmasters trained up. And I think it's an awful idea, but I'm going to do it anyhow, right? But I have pushed back so many of those things and just being late on them, almost strategically late, in the interest of being able to literally just walk around, right? Like the ability to like calm yourself and be like, you know what, I'm just gonna like get up and walk around, whether it's the squadron, walk around the shop. On your way in to your shop, do you walk immediately to your desk and sit down, or do you put down your bag and talk to some of the people that are in the office, right? And ask just how they're doing. So just a simple question, you know, there's so much power in asking just how are you doing? You know what I mean? And it's amazing if you're just quiet, and I have to quiet myself sometimes because I have a tendency to talk. Here I am, just kind of blabbering on sometimes, but I have to quiet myself and just listen to people, because you'll find, you know, depending how deep of a relationship you have with the people in your shop or in your office or in your squadron, sometimes they won't immediately come out and say what's on their mind, right? And it could be a new idea. It could be something that's bothering them. It could be maybe an interpersonal issue that's going on in the flight or in the section. But if they don't have a strong personal connection with you, sometimes they will speak when there's just that blank space and an opportunity to talk, right? Because people are uncomfortable with just silence, right? If I were to stop talking for 5 seconds, holy smokes, I got uncomfortable. Did anyone else get uncomfortable in the room? Like, it's uncomfortable with silence. So sometimes you just ask the question, you're not awkward, but you just have that like open, you know, demeanor for people to receive, you know, information. They'll just talk to you, right? And it's amazing what you can hear and learn. And oh yeah, by the way, now that they know that you're a listener, they will come to your office, right? Or they will come to your desk and be like, hey, do you got a minute? Like, yeah, man. And you never say no, unless there's an emergency going on, right? You never say no. Like, there's so many times where I've been late and I'm like, oh gosh. And then sometimes I will have to say no because it's a family appointment, right? And that's something I have to get better on, right? And to not inconvenience my family for the betterment of the team, right? The Muleys. You just always say yes. Like, yeah, absolutely. Maybe it's good to set an expectation. Say, I've got a minute. I'm going to meet with my daughter or whatever, but I've got a minute. If that's not enough time, let's set an appointment, right? Because you want to show that interest. And it'll amaze you when you're building an effective team. And this goes down back to being a leader in the Air Force, or just being, I don't care, a professional, period. Building an effective team, right? As a leader or a manager, that's so important, right? Because if they don't come to you with what's bothering them or what their issues are, I think we talked about this in the previous OPD, they either think you don't care or that you're not going to do anything to help them, right? And be able to take that information and actually do something about it. I mean, you've brought up some things before. Leiter's brought up things before. You know, Master Sergeant Lee has brought up things before. Bennett, all around the room, everyone's had an idea, and we've tried it, right? We've at least actioned on it or discussed it and talked about it, and that builds that trust. That builds that, you know, professional empathy that you will share in that experience and listen to those conversations. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Cool.
Yeah, that was a good question. I mean, we could have a whole separate OPD just on that concept from the 90s or early aughts, leadership by walking around. And Colonel Trumble just touched on a bunch of stuff about communication, sense of urgency, and what he brought up earlier in the this video about team building and collaboration. You'll see this as an AC, or when you start to take over an office and get some leadership roles, people will come to you with problems filled with righteous indignation. And one of the hardest things to do is just kind of take that input, internalize it for them, take a breath, and then kind of do some of the research or put it on them to go ask some questions and get some background. Because I see a lot of times, especially with young E's, you know, they're looking through a soda straw and they want you to roll in on their behalf, but they don't have the whole picture. So, you know, there's a saying out there, you know, failure to plan on your part does not constitute an emergency on my part. You know, so don't let people push you into that situation to take up a cause without getting the full picture. And you know, kind of shifting gears a little bit, some of the success I feel like I've had and I've seen other people have is that walking around, talking to people, the soft skills. It's really easy to sit down at your desk and just work in your stovepipe, but if you're really going to build collaboration, it's based on relationships. Just if you're a scheduler or working awards and decks and you have no reason to walk back to stand eval, maybe just pop in and be like, talk to a CeeLo and, strike up a friendship, strike up a conversation, talk about what's going on, become a trafficker in information. And I don't mean that to be a busybody, but it gives you perspective. It lets you know what's going on. It builds that relationship and it makes everyone better. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Awesome.
We've eclipsed the 1 hour mark, so I try to keep these pretty disciplined with the time. I'll give everybody an extra second if there's a burning question, and then I'll kind of close. So the floor is yours for any reattacks.
Hey, sir. I just want to throw out a new face in the crowd. Justin Thompson, one of our new casuals, just got here. Just so if anybody's wondering who he is, he's pre-pilot training. Same with Jack Dargle. I think he's in the crowd as well. We'll do a proper hail one of these days with a full intro and everything, but that's the new face.
Yeah, welcome, guys. I'm excited to have casuals around again. I have fond memories of my casual experience. I'm sure Colonel Trumble does as well. We're going to take care of you guys, even with this COVID environment. So I hope to get together with you guys next week and kind of put the program together so you get something really productive out of this. Brian, you got words for him?
No, yeah, guys. Some of my fondest memories in the Air Force was as a casual. Part of that reason is because I was part of an awesome fighter squadron that liked having fun, right, and gave me a lot of latitude as a party planner, as someone who just searched out things I could innovate in the squadron and just kind of, help out the quality of life for the members in the squadron. And I'm gonna, and Colonel Pollack, I'm sure, is gonna charge you guys with that too, along with kind of giving you just a taste of what it's like to be a C5 pilot or a MAF pilot, right, in the Air Force, because it's a golden ticket you guys have been given, and it's yours to take in cash, right? But I tell this kind of a lot of our students that show up, right, our young 18-year-olds, not that you're 18, you've already been through college, right, that you gotta come and pay to play, right? So you gotta come prepared, give us your best effort, whatever that is, and it's going to be a wild ride, and it's going to be a fun ride. I promise you that. One last thing, Cosmo, what's just to plant the seed and hang that carrot out for the next series? What do we have going next week?
Yep. So I've been working on next week's video. So next month's OPD series is enlisted perspectives. Kind of build that self-awareness and build that empathy. If I'm being completely honest and blunt, I don't think we really understand our E's, or we do a very good job of mentorship and leadership. We kind of operate in parallel. So we kind of want to get at that and learn about them and how we can better grow that part of the team. So next week's video is enlisted careers. And I basically have broken down the 36, 26, 18 or whatever it is about the enlisted force structure. So you don't have to read it. I read it for you, so you don't have to worry about that. So you'll watch the video, and then our speakers next Thursday will be Senior DeAngelis and Senior Reinbold. And they can give us more of the, I'm going to give you the AFI big picture look, and they're going to give us more of the squadron, the applicable stuff. The following weeks, we're going to have engineer and loadmaster perspectives, talk about their careers, and also talk about, to them, what makes a good officer, what are some good stories they've had from the road. And then the last piece will be about SARM, admin, first sergeant, and we'll also have the shirt give us some maintenance perspectives. If somehow miraculously COVID is lifted, we'll do a maintenance appreciation day, but that'll probably have to wait a few months down the road. There's probably only going to be 3 videos because week 3, I plan on having a very special event with a special guest, but I'm going to keep that under wraps, and we'll talk about that later. So all that being said, I had a plan for April and May, but I don't have a plan for June or July. So if you guys have ideas for a series you'd like to learn about or something we can put together, please shoot me a message, because I can't do it all on my own. And there you go. That's it.